If you have not listened to the episode of Old Ladies Know Stuff with my friend Kate Battistelli, go back and listen to that episode. It's about her book called The After Party of the Empty Nest. And after we hung up, she started telling me her testimony of how she came to Christ. And I'm like, wait, time out. We have to have this. So I'm backing up and we're going to just take a minute, because you know what? We need to hear stories of how God plucks people out of the height of their career, out of their successes. We always think it has to be someone in the gutter that's losing everything before they're ready to come to Jesus. But God sends people to share his story of hope and salvation to people of all walks of life. And I want this to inspire you to be an evangelist and to share your story with someone. We've overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. So, Kate, I would love for you to tell our listeners the story of how you came to know Jesus as your Lord and Savior.
Sure, I would love to. I did not grow up knowing the Lord. My husband and I, we'd come out of the musical theater Broadway world, and we were living in New York, pursuing our careers. I want to be a Tony Award-winning actress on Broadway. My husband's conducting on Radio City, on Broadway, all that. Well, we're pursuing our careers, but at the same time, we'd started a small business. And we had a gal that was mentoring us, and we found out she was a born-again Jewish woman, which is a Messianic Jew.
Mm-hmm.
And she kept inviting us to church. And we kept saying, no, we're good. And she kept inviting us. She was relentless, which I always tell people, don't stop inviting them, because eventually they have to say yes. But she kept inviting us. And we finally said, okay, if she invites us one more time, let's just go get this over with. So the next week she said, you guys got to come Friday night. We've got this great gospel choir. You're going to love the music. So we thought, well, all right, okay, we'll go. And we end up a week later, we come up out of the subway, and the church was a couple blocks away. It was in an old theater, big old theater. And we're walking towards the church, and you could sense the building pulsating. It was just something was different about where we were going. And we go in, enter the church, and she walks us down to the front row. We are the three white faces in an all black church. And I'm pretty certain she told the pastor, we need to get these two into the kingdom. So he gives this fiery message, gives the altar call. My hand goes up on one side of the theater. His hand goes up. We didn't know we were both accepting the Lord at the same time. We went forward, became Christians, gave our hearts to Jesus, and really never looked back. But we still continued to, pursue our careers. We had our daughter about a year later. I still want to be a Tony Award-winning actress. He's still doing his thing. But we start getting this sense that I don't think this is what the Lord has for us. And it became very clear. God was saying, this is not the life I've called you to. You're to lay this down. And you're to go like Abraham, go to a land I'll show you, but I'm not going to tell you. We just had to kind of obey and go. We didn't know what we were supposed to do, but we ended up leaving New York. We're both originally from New Jersey. So we moved back to New Jersey, continued with our home business. I started homeschooling in the 80s, way before it was cool, and eventually moved down to Orlando, where we raised our daughter. And it was just a crazy thing. But what I can tell your listeners is when you're obedient, God will honor that. He will take that and do something with it. And I think in our case, I so wanted to be famous. God knew he couldn't use me in that way, but he could take it to the next generation. Wow. And I always say our ceiling became her floor. It was where she could go. Her desire was to worship the Lord. She didn't care about being famous. That wasn't the thing. She wants to make his name famous. And he could use that. And I truly believe that's because of our obedience, because we laid down careers that my husband has a doctorate in music. We've been doing this for years. You don't just walk away. Right. They all thought we were crazy, but we knew it's like we can't keep going. We have to go this other way. But God honored it. And I believe he will eventually. You're going to see the fruit of that obedience.
Yeah, that's great. That is such a good story. I just love knowing how wherever we are, God will use us to share our faith if we'll have the boldness and if we're willing. And honestly, I think part of heaven is just going to be seeing the faces of those that we shared with, and maybe we didn't even get to see them come to Christ, but somewhere that seed was planted and somewhere else someone watered it, and I think it's just glorious. So I appreciate you taking time to share with me
Oh, sure.
just the faithfulness of the Lord to draw you to himself, and your husband, because that's not always the story either, right? The wife gets saved. Not always does the husband also, but to have you both surrender to Christ, how glorious.
It really is a crazy story. And I didn't tell you the whole King and I story, but how the Lord reached down and pulled me out of obscurity. And he does that. To me, that's a real picture of his intimacy, what he desires, and how he will do that and take us out of that and just give us a place with him where we know we are his bride. It's a
Yes.
really, I mean, I could tell that story another time. It's crazy, but I just see how he will do things in our lives that we won't always notice till years later because age gives perspective. Old
Right.
ladies know stuff. So
That's right. And honestly, his providence is just, you look back, that's what's so cool about being, I'm going to be 64 years old next month. Looking back at 64 years of life of his providential hand in times, in opportunities, in losses that we never even think about in the middle of it, that it's God's hand. And I want to make sure I share, in case they didn't see the other episode, The King and I, you were on Broadway playing opposite Yul Brenner for 1,000 performances of The King and I. All right. Well, I appreciate you taking time to share that story with me. It was so good. I'm so excited we got to get to know each other, and I can't wait to see what God does with this wonderful new book of yours, The After Party of the Empty Nest. And go to Kate's website, Kate Battistelli. You can find all her resources and connect with her there. Thanks again, Kate.
Thanks, Rhonda.